Welcome back to Core Sample. I'm Sydney. I just finished a run, and if you don't know, I'm an endurance athlete. I'm a marathon runner, and I've completed the Ironman and many half Ironman competitions. So I generally feel most confident when I'm running. So I thought right after I finished my run, I'm going to try this on YouTube as well as trying it on a podcast. So if you've heard this on podcast, and you want to know that I'm an actual human, I'm doing a video and sending this on YouTube as well. I will also mention that the door is open behind me. I adopted a dog at 12 years of age and he's very grumpy. He's 15 now and he might be coming in and out of the room, but it's better than having him knock on the door. So, I want to start today by telling you what I do almost every day. Before I open my email, before I read the news, before I look at the market, I read contracts. It's not very exciting. Procurement contracts that are coming from the Department of War press releases. These are boring documents that I'm guessing almost nobody is reading but me and maybe a handful of analysts somewhere. And I do it because of something I learned a long time ago when I started my career as an equity trader straight out of college. And then I spent years in investment banking, asset management, hedge funds before I ever touched cybersecurity. The fact is, the numbers don't lie, the contracts don't lie. The headlines, they lie all the time. They're there to sell a story. So bear with me. I remember in my career working at a company when the project I was involved with hit the news, but not the way I expected it to. The information was wrong, but obviously I knew that as I had the information, but this stuck with me throughout my career. Essentially, the message is get the facts. So if you want to know what's actually happening, not what people are talking about, but what's actually happening, you go to the documents. You read the procurement signals, you read the filings, you read the data. And right now, the data is telling me something I think every woman listening to this show needs to hear. So let me give you the picture I'm seeing. In 2025, the Spider Gold Shares ETF, the symbols GLD, posted an annual total return of 63.68%. Silver and silver tracking ETFs delivers between 140 and roughly 180%. The energy sector, the Spider, the ticker is XLE, is up 25.9% this year, even with the volatility since April. And when I mention the volatility, I'm referring to the geopolitics and what's going on with the Strait of Hormuz. So let's compare that to the S&P 500. So if you want to look at it, it's ticker SPY, which generated a 17.72% total return in 2025 and is up 10.93% this year. That's not a normal distribution of return. And that's the story. The story is that real assets, gold, silver, energy, critical minerals, are repricing in real time with broad equities are doing fine, but nothing extraordinary. So why is this happening? The US debt, as I record this, is over $39 trillion and growing every second. Inflation isn't going anywhere. If you've been to the pump or the grocery store, you get it. China controls roughly 86% of global critical mineral refining and is conducting cyber operations targeting reserves, operational technology, infrastructure, and China has manipulated commodity prices depending on who you want to believe. The Russian-Ukraine war, it didn't end as swiftly as it started. Remember when it started? It was a short timeline, and what's going on now? And the procurement contracts I'm reading every morning are telling me something the equity market is not pricing in yet. Let me tell you what I mean by that. So I publish a newsletter called Sternella Signals. I'll link the link in the show notes. It goes out every Wednesday, and this Wednesday I wrote a note that I want to read to you because I think it captures what I'm trying to point out. So here's what I wrote. After reading the Department of War contracts and watching the oil and equity markets, it appears they're telling different stories about duration and scope on the geopolitical situation. And also, I follow defense stocks as well. So markets are pricing a single near-term resolution, in my opinion. But the procurement documents from the Department of War is simultaneously focusing on underwater submarines and surveillance through 2035, potential space controls through 2030, Allied digital command integration across multiple nations, domestic munitions, supply chains to finished missiles, and naval shipbuilding infrastructure that by legislative design will take a decade to fully come online. So I wanted to read that and make a note because short term is not 2030. Short term is not 2035. So this diverges from short-term market sentiment, and the evidence favors the procurement signals over the price signals. So where is all this money going to come from? And this is my guess, is we're going to have to inflate our way out of it, which means real assets are going to continue to increase in value. So as we inflate, real assets are going to hold their value. I'm not giving you investment advice. I never will do that. You need to do your own research and you need to talk to a licensed professional who knows your specific situation. But what I do want to do is I want to give you the framework that I use to read what's happening. Because most people are listening to the headlines and assessing that's the signal, and they're assuming that's the signal. The headlines are not the signal. The procurement contracts are the signals. The filings are the signals. The data, that's the signal. Now, here's where I want to bring this back to why I started Core Sample. So when I left the corporate world in 2024, I spent that entire year studying mining, resources, oil and gas, and defense companies. I listened to every podcast I could find in this space. I read every research report. I sat with the filings until I understood them. And I noticed two things at the same time. The first, that every single voice I was hearing in the industry was a man's voice. So the podcast I would listen to would be investing in mining podcast, mining in general, resources, oil and gas, and the interviews. Nearly all the panels and nearly all the analysts, when I go on earnings calls, they're men. Men are everywhere. The second was that women working in these industries, in operations, in finance, in legal, in environmental, in investor relations, were the ones who actually understood what was happening on the ground. So the technical knowledge, the operational instincts, the sector fluency, it's there. It just wasn't getting in the microphone. So I started this show. Core Sample is for the women who knows her industry better than the financial analysts that are writing about it. The women who can read a permitting timeline, a resource estimate, a cyber disclosure, or a procurement contract and see things the market is missing. If that's you, pull up a chair. This is your seat. Now I want to talk about something practical before I let you go. So I got asked a lot about Sternella. That's my capital market cybersecurity advisory firm. The work that Sternella does is real and the rules are real. So this is the rules that I'm talking about is the SEC regulations SK item 106 and form 8K item 1.05, and they're still in full force. The cybersecurity disclosures requirements for public companies haven't been rolled back, but this is where things have shifted recently. Chairman Paul Atkins was sworn in to lead the SEC in April 2025. Enforcement actions are at their lowest levels in a decade. The posture is shifting towards individual accountability rather than corporate fines, in my opinion. What this means in practice is that the regulatory urgency for cybersecurity compliance has changed. The rules are still there, but the enforcement risk is softened, and it will likely take a real catalyst. So, in my opinion, this is going to be a major incident or a high profile failure to bring that urgency back in the front of every CEO's desk. I'm not telling you this because I'm giving up on Sternella. I'm absolutely not. I'm telling you this because it's a perfect example of what this podcast is really about. It's not about whether the work matters, because I'm here to tell you the work does matter, but it's about timing. Timing is everything. And reading the timing, reading where the macro cycle is, where the regulatory environment is, where capital is flowing, where the procurement signals are pointing, that's the entire game. You can believe in your work and still recognize that the moment for it is fully matter hasn't arrived yet. That's not failure. That's reading the signals. And it's the same framework I use in my career strategy practice, Murtis. I'll link the website in the show notes, which is built on the exact idea. Pivot with purpose. Read the macro cycle. Position yourself in sectors where structural demand is growing. Move before the crowd arrives. Sometimes the right move is to go all in. And sometimes the right move is to build, learn, and wait for the catalyst. Patience is golden. So here's what I want you to do with this episode. If you're a woman in mining, resources, oil and gas, or defense, start paying attention to things that aren't on the front page. Read the procurement contracts, read the SEC filings, read what your industry's largest companies are actually disclosing about risk and operations and capital allocation. Listen to what the data is telling you, not what the headlines are telling you. You don't need to become an investment banker. You don't need a Bloomberg terminal. Edgar is free. Cedar Plus is free. We talked about those in the previous or the last two episodes. And the Department of War contracts, it's public information. Your industry knowledge is the foundation. The data is the multiplier. And if you want a place to learn alongside other women doing this work, pull up a chair. That's exactly what Killer Sample is for. The signal is everywhere. Most people aren't reading it, but you can. Patience is golden. The timing is coming. And when it does, I want you to be ready. Pull up a chair. I'm really glad you found us.